It's 5:42 inches the evening, and David is standing in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom. His 3-year-old, Eva, is standing on her bed, arms crossed, chin up. He has asked her 4 times to put on her pajamas. She has looked him directly in the eye each time and said one word, no. His jaw is tight. His patience is gone. He thinks, she knows exactly what I am asking. She understands the word no. She's choosing to defy me. Here's what the neuroscience says. She isn't. At least not the way you think. If you have a toddler, you know this moment. It's not the tantrum on the supermarket floor. We've talked about that. This is different. This is the quiet defiance. The deliberate no. The look in their eyes that says, I heard you, and I am not doing it. And if you're like most parents, your brain does something automatic in that moment. It interprets the behavior as intentional. It assigns motive. She knows what she's doing. She's testing me. She's being defiant on purpose. And that interpretation changes everything about how you respond. Because if she's being defiant on purpose, then your job is to correct the behavior, to assert authority, to make sure she understands who's in charge. But what if that interpretation, the one your brain makes automatically in under half a second, is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what a toddler's brain can actually do? Dr. Adele Diamond is a neuroscientist at the University of British Columbia and one of the world's leading researchers on executive function development. In a series of studies spanning over 2 decades, she and her colleagues demonstrated something that should fundamentally change how we see toddler behavior. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles impulse control, planning, working memory, and the ability to inhibit a response, develops more slowly than any other brain region. At age 3, it's not underperforming. It's not delayed. It's simply not built yet. This is the critical piece most parenting advice misses. When Eva hears put on your pajamas, several things have to happen inside her brain for her to comply. The auditory cortex has to process the sound. The language centers have to decode the words. The prefrontal cortex has to inhibit what she wants to do. Keep playing, keep standing on the bed, keep asserting her newly discovered autonomy, and initiate a different action. That last step, the inhibition and initiation, is a prefrontal function. And at 3 years old, her prefrontal cortex is the neurological equivalent of a house with the foundation poured but no walls. The hardware for compliance simply isn't connected yet. So what is actually happening when Eva says no? Not defiance. At least not the way adults mean it. What's happening is that a developing brain has encountered a demand, and the most advanced tool it has available for responding to that demand is a single word that it knows has power. No is not a rejection of your authority. No is the most sophisticated executive function a 3-year-old can reliably execute. It is the brain's way of saying, I perceive that I am a separate person, and I am trying to exercise that separateness with the only tool I have. This idea that what looks like defiance is actually a developing sense of self has been central to Scandinavian parenting philosophy for decades. In Sweden, preschool teachers are trained to recognize what they call jag-utveckling, self-development. It's not a phase to discipline out of a child. It's a milestone to support. Just as you wouldn't punish a child for learning to walk unsteadily, Nordic educators believe you shouldn't punish a child for learning to assert themselves unskillfully. The behavior isn't the problem. The behavior is the practice. Research from Dr. Michael Tomasello at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology adds another layer. His team found that by around 18 months, children begin to understand that other people have separate minds, separate desires, separate intentions. This is one of the most profound cognitive leaps a human being ever makes. But understanding that you have a separate mind and knowing what to do with that separateness are 2 completely different things. That gap between knowing I am me and knowing how to be me in relation to others takes years to close. In the meantime, the gap is filled with no. Here is where the science gets practical. If defiance isn't defiance, if it's a brain under construction practicing selfhood with limited tools, then the response shouldn't be correction. It should be something else entirely. Researchers at the Yale Parenting Center, led by Dr. Alan Kasdan, spent years studying what actually changes child behavior. Not what feels right to parents in the moment, but what produces measurable change over time. Their findings were remarkably consistent with what Nordic parents had been practicing for decades, and they can be broken down into 3 shifts. The first shift is about timing. Most parents intervene at the peak of the interaction. The child says no. The parent's stress response activates, and within seconds, both nervous systems are in fight or flight. This is the worst possible moment to teach anything. A stressed brain cannot learn. It can only react. The prefrontal cortex, the part you're trying to reach, is the first thing to go offline under stress. So the first shift is simply this: pause. Not a dramatic pause. Not a power struggle pause. A neurological pause. 10 seconds where you do nothing except breathe and soften your body. You are waiting for your own prefrontal cortex to come back online so you can lend it to your child. This is not a trick. It's biology. Remember what the Karolinska Institute researchers found? A stressed parent's cortisol spike registers in their child's nervous system within 90 seconds before a single word is spoken. But the reverse is also true. A regulated parent's nervous system begins to downregulate their child's nervous system on roughly the same timeline. The pause is not doing nothing. The pause is the intervention. The second shift is about what you say. Not put on your pajamas now for the 5th time. Not because I said so. Not you're being difficult. The most effective verbal response, according to both the Yale data and decades of Nordic practice, is to name what's happening inside the child. You really don't want to stop playing. Putting on pajamas means the day is over, and you're not ready for the day to be over. This is affect labeling, the same mechanism that reduces amygdala activation within 60 seconds. But it's also something more. When you name what's happening inside your child with specificity, you are doing 2 things at once. You are calming their emotional brain, and you are building the very neural bridge they need between the feeling and the word for the feeling. Every time you do this, you are not just managing a moment. You are constructing the architecture for future self-regulation. The third shift is the hardest for most Western parents because it feels like giving in. It's about what comes after the connection. Once you've paused, once you've named the feeling, you don't then demand compliance. You invite collaboration. We need to get pajamas on. How do you want to do it? Do you want to hop to the bathroom like a frog? Or do you want me to carry you upside down? This is not negotiation from weakness. This is what Danish parenting expert Jesper Juhl called personal authority. Authority rooted in relationship, not in power. You are not asking permission to be the parent. You are acknowledging that a developing human being with a still-forming brain responds better to choice than to command. The boundary is not negotiable. Pajamas are happening. How they happen, that's where you give them room to practice selfhood. The long-term data on this approach is compelling. A longitudinal study from the University of Minnesota, following children from ages 2 to 15, found that parents who responded to toddler defiance with what researchers called autonomy supportive strategies, naming feelings, offering choices within firm boundaries, staying connected during a conflict, raised children who, by middle school, showed significantly higher levels of self-regulation, academic persistence, and social competence. The difference wasn't small, and it held across socioeconomic levels, across family structures, across cultures. Here is why this matters beyond the pajama standoff at 5:42 inches the evening. Every single interaction you have with your toddler during these years is doing one of 2 things. It's either building the neural pathways for self-regulation, or it's reinforcing the neural pathways for stress reactivity. There is no neutral. The brain is experience-dependent. The circuits that fire together wire together. When your toddler says no, and you respond with connection instead of force, you are quite literally shaping the architecture of their prefrontal cortex. When you respond with threats, punishment, or power assertion, you are strengthening the amygdala-based stress circuits instead. This is not metaphor. This is neuroplasticity. This is the physical wiring of a human brain being laid down, synapse by synapse, interaction by interaction. Back in the doorway, David has a choice. It's the same choice every parent faces a dozen times a day. He can escalate. He can raise his voice. He can assert his authority and win this battle. Or he can pause, take one breath, and then another, and say, "You're having way too much fun to stop now. I get it." Eva looks at him. She's still standing on the bed, but something has shifted. His body has softened. His voice has dropped. His nervous system is no longer broadcasting threat. And because her 3-year-old brain is, by design, wired to sync with the adult next to her, her nervous system begins to follow. He says, "Here's the deal. Pajamas have to happen, but you get to choose how we get to the bathroom. Frog hops or upside down?" She chooses upside down. 3 minutes ago, this was a power struggle. Now it's a game. The boundary never moved. Pajamas happened. But something else happened too. In her developing brain, a connection was strengthened. The connection between I am frustrated and I can still be connected. Between I don't, I want to and I can still cooperate. Between I am my own person and I am safe with the person who takes care of me. That connection is the foundation of everything. Emotional regulation, social competence, the ability to handle disappointment without falling apart. The ability to assert yourself without destroying relationships. It doesn't get built in one moment. It gets built in thousands of moments. Most of them small, most of them invisible, most of them happening when nobody is watching except a parent and a 3-year-old who just said no for the 5th time. The Scandinavian approach to childhood rests on a single conviction that most Western parenting culture has not fully absorbed. You are not raising a child who obeys. You are raising an adult who can regulate themselves, relate to others, and navigate a complex world without falling apart. Those capacities are not taught through lectures. They are built through thousands of small moments when a developing brain reaches its limits and finds, instead of punishment, a regulated nervous system waiting to lend it calm. Your toddler is not defiant. Their brain is under construction, and you are not their manager. You are the architect. If you want to understand the specific parenting habits that build the strongest prefrontal cortex in early childhood, the daily routines that neuroscience shows actually change brain architecture, that video is right here. Which of the 3 shifts feels hardest for you? Pause, the naming, or the invitation? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one in the first 24 hours.